Alrighty, welcome everybody. My name is Ken Rohla. I am from New Smyrna Beach, Florida, which is a little beach town just south of Daytona Beach on the northeast coast of Florida. Thank you all for coming. Today's talk is going to be, what is today's talk? How to grow your own nutrient-dense superfoods for pennies. Usually I have a much longer title. It's how to grow your own high-ormus, probiotic, antioxidant, nutrient-dense superfoods for pennies. But they needed to keep it short, so. And we're going to talk about what ormus is and some of these things. First, I want to give you guys out a handout because I'm very solutions-oriented, and I like to give people information so that they don't have to take tons of notes. Although in this talk, I usually don't do this talk in this format. I usually do hands-on demonstrations where I show people how to grow food and how to make ferments and things. So this is kind of a first for me. This is going to turn into a DVD set on how to grow nutrient-dense foods and superfoods and how to make your own supplements and things. But I just want to give you a little handout on how to grow sprouts the way I grow them, which is way beyond anything I've ever seen before anywhere else. So I'm president of a company called Fresh and Alive. The website is freshandalive.com. And basically, I'm a teacher. I teach people how to maintain health to whatever degree they're interested in, using detoxification, nutrient-dense foods, including living foods, emotional clearing, and reprogramming of limiting unconscious beliefs. And so I've been doing this for about 25 years now, and because I have a background in electrical engineering, I see things through that lens, so to speak. I've always been interested in quantum physics and just really understanding how things work. And so when I got into the natural healing business years ago, I was always interested in how things work. You know, how does this work? How does that work? People would say, oh, do this or do that. It's like, why? How does that work? And that's always got me into trouble. Throughout my schooling, I was always getting in trouble for asking why? How does that work and why? And even when I was in Boy Scouts, I was taking the God and Country badge, and I had to meet with a church minister every week to discuss all things God. And I kept asking him, well, where does God live? And where is heaven? And is it like up in the sky? Is it out in space? Is it another dimension? I'm trying to figure out the physics of heaven. And this pastor was eminently frustrated with me. But that's kind of been the way my whole life has been. So we're going to give out some information today. Normally this is a 2 to 3 hour talk, and I'm going to condense this into an hour and a half. I hope to have time for a few questions, but if I don't, you can catch me afterwards and I can answer questions, because I want to give you solutions to some of these major problems that we have, including the lack of nutrients in our food, but also how to make what the medical system is calling functional foods, which are foods that heal, which is pretty much any living food heals if it's actually got nutrients in it. Surprise, surprise, most of our food, even organic food these days, a lot of times does not have the nutrient levels that we need and that it should have in it. Now, we're very fortunate here with Food and Thought because they grow a lot of their own food, and that is an amazing concept that a health food store grows its own food and sells it. And I think, okay, it sounded like I lost my mic for a second. So, that I would say is an exception to the rule. It's very rare that you see that, but you're very, very fortunate to have that here in Naples. So, let me get my little clicker here. So, let's start out first. I need to discuss some fundamentals with you guys, because when I actually start telling you solutions and how to do things, it's going to sound like a bunch of craziness if I don't. So we're going to get a little bit into physics and chemistry and some advanced stuff that you probably don't hear a lot about, particularly in relation to food. My microphone? Yeah, your battery. Oh, okay. There you go. Okay. So we're going to get a battery change here. So there are two major concepts or ideas that I want to present to you before we get into specific solutions. One, well, first of all, let me give a disclaimer. Probably in this talk, I probably won't be discussing anything that might be construed as medical or health advice, but just in case I do, whatever I'm going to be saying today is my opinion. It is not to be construed as any kind of health or medical advice. It's for your education only. And in fact, I'm not a licensed healthcare professional of any kind, and the FDA wouldn't like it very much, and probably a bunch of other regulating agencies, if I was to give out medical advice. So please don't construe any of this as health or medical advice. It's for your edification only. And in fact, I would recommend not taking any of my advice because of that, okay? If you do, shame on you. Okay, so this talk is about growing not just nutrient-dense food, but also superfoods and how to make your own supplements, which is pretty cool. You can save yourself a ton of money, and you can have nutrient-dense supplements that will blow the doors off of anything you can buy in the health food stores. That's why I usually don't give this talk in health food stores. There are some supplements that I still use, but you can go a long, long way with making your own, and that's what I'm going to show you. So I'm going to be talking about how to grow nutrient-dense sprouts, and I've seen tons and tons and tons of information about growing sprouts, but I'll guarantee you I've never seen any sprouting videos on using scalar energy and monoatomic elements to grow your food with, and we're going to be talking about that. And you can get incredible results. When I showed these methods to Joe Mercola, for example, he's a neighbor of mine, he was blown away by the nutrient levels in the food. And I had been telling him for years about this stuff, and it didn't really register until finally he grew his own sprouts this way, and he got phenomenal results. And he called me up, and he's like, "What the heck is this?" Because the nutrient levels were off the charts. And so that's what I'm going to show you, is how to feed your plants and your ferments and things interesting nutrients, how to put them into energy fields that will make them have nutrient levels off the charts. So growing sprouts, growing your own crops outdoors if you've got space to grow them outdoors. Also, how to grow or ferment your own superfood detox tonics that are massively antioxidant, massively probiotic, and ridiculously cheap. I just made 10 gallons of a brew that had 27 different herbs in it, and had rock powders in it, and had all kinds of dense nutrients in it for about $75 for 10 gallons. And just to give you an idea of what that means in economics, I used to sell a product that used the same fermentation process, but nowhere nearly as sophisticated, and 1 quart of it was $46. So, that's 40 times $46, and of course this is worth way, way more because there's a lot more good stuff in it. So you can make mass quantities of nutrient-dense probiotic antioxidant supplements that you can get the nutrients that you're not going to get into your food, or you can grow your own food and get the nutrients that way. So there are several ways of doing it, and I'm going to show you how to do that. Okay, so one of the concepts that you need to learn about first is what scientists are calling scalar energy these days. It goes by other names, torsion waves, tachyon energy, chi, prana, life force, etc., etc. Basically, scalar energy is a faster-than-light energy that is kind of like the Force in Star Wars. It is an energy that flows through the cosmos, going much faster than the speed of light, and it actually slows down and coagulates into the matter and energy that we can see and measure. And so you can do things with it because it can create matter, it can create electromagnetic energy, and it can also alter them. You can do amazing things with it. And in fact, that's how a lot of energy work, like human energy work, doing Reiki and energetic healing work, that's how it works. Your own body, your own physiology is a scalar wave generator and transmission system, and that's how energy healers are able to direct that energy and alter matter. That's what's going on with energetic healing. So where does this energy come from? Well, it comes from the centers of galaxies. This is from phys.org, which is a preeminent online physics journal, and they've got an article here called Massive Black Holes Switched On by Galaxy Collision, and they note in this that the center of our galaxy has a singularity, or a black hole. It's really a black hole-white hole combination. Energy's flowing out, and it spirals around the galaxy and then flows back in. But this energy is coming from the centers of galaxies. And here's another article from phys.org noting that these massive black holes blast out radiation and ultra-fast winds. So this energy is blasting out of the centers of galaxies, and it whirls around in a field that's shaped like a donut or a torus. So our galaxy has a torus-shaped field around it of this energy that's flowing outward from the center of the galaxy. It spirals as it comes out. So these energy waves are spiraling as they come out, and they branch as they come out. So they're spiraling and they're fractaling as they come out, and it comes out and follows this toroidal path around the cosmos and goes back in. So it comes out one side of the galaxy, spirals around, and is relayed throughout the cosmos or throughout the galaxy, and then it spirals back into the center, and it just keeps recirculating. I liken it to God consciousness because it has an intelligence. It is really the fabric of the universe. And so that energy is relayed from sun to sun to sun from the center of the galaxy. It comes out from the center. It's been discovered by people like Nassim Haramein and others that suns and planets have singularities or black hole, white hole combinations at the center of them. So this energy coming from the center of the galaxy is relayed from the big suns at the center of the galaxy outward through their rays to the suns farther along. And so it's relayed from sun to sun to sun and to the planets, which also have singularities at the center of them. And that's why when it gets to us, it's coming down from above from our sun to us, and it's also coming up from the center of the earth. And that's why you have these practices like Qigong and Tai Chi and Ayurveda, all these ancient methods of working with energy, with the human biology. It's about bringing energy up from the root, up from the ground, and down from above. That's why. It's emanating from the center of the earth. It's emanating from our sun and from other places in the cosmos. And it is the fabric of matter and energy. It slows down and coagulates into the matter and energy that we can see and measure. And consciousness is what brings it into form. It's actually consciousness that grabs it, slows it down, and coagulates it into the matter and energy that we can see and measure. So galaxies have these toroidal-shaped fields. So do solar systems. So do planets, right? You've seen the sun and the field lines. This is taught in basic physics, the magnetic field lines of planets and suns. They have these toroidal-shaped fields, right? And so do human beings. Human beings have a toroidal-shaped field. And so do cells. And so do atoms. And so do subatomic particles, and on. And actually, when you start getting down below the atomic state, you get into energy. You get into realms of energy where matter is in wave form rather than in particles. The whole Bohr model of the atom and the whole particle state of the atom is incorrect and inaccurate, and there are lots of people showing that. But at any rate, as above, so below. You've got this recursive, spiraling, fractaling energy that repeats itself at every scale of the universe, from the galactic to the subatomic. This is an actual optical photograph of an iron atom, or iron atoms bound together. This is from a device developed back in the 1950s from a man named Elmer Nemes, N-E-M-E-S. It's known as a Nemescope. And I don't know how Nemes did it. He had a whole slew of patents on this device, but it could actually take optical photographs of atoms. Magnification power, 5 million. And this was recently brought to my attention by a medical doctor who had Nemes's photographs, original photographs and information. It's mind-blowing when you think about it, that we can actually photograph atoms. But this is what they look like, and this confirms a lot of things that we believed about atomic structure before we actually saw the actual structure. You've got these round spheres. Those are the energy fields of the nuclei of the atoms. And then you've got the atomic bonds binding the atoms together into the metal. Those are the energy lines that you see. Those tube-looking things are energy lines. And it's quite amazing when you really get into atomic structure and what's known about it and then see this picture. It's really mind-blowing. So we basically got this giant web. This cosmos of ours is a giant web of black holes. From the black hole at the center of the galaxy to black holes throughout the cosmos to black holes within our body. When I say black holes, what I really mean are singularities that are a combination of a black hole which sucks in energy and a white hole on the other side that releases energy. So you've got this cycling of energy that's created by these black hole, white hole combinations, these singularities. And that's what creates the cycles in the universe. This energy is flowing in and out of these toroidal-shaped fields at every level of granularity. And in the universe, from the galactic on down to the subatomic. When you get to our bodies, we have these black holes within our bodies. They correspond to the acupuncture meridians. They're in the DNA. They're in the brain neural pathways. They're along the spine. And we'll talk about the mechanisms of them in a minute and what the heck this has to do with making your own superfoods, right? Because it's like, well, this is great. What am I going to do in my kitchen? I'm going to get there. But this fractal pattern, this recursive, branching, spiral fractal pattern manifests throughout our reality, and you can see it in plants. You know, trees, for example, or here in the case of vegetables, you look at the cross-section of a cabbage or a cauliflower, you can see this fractal pattern. And if you go onto YouTube and just search on fractals, you'll see these videos of these patterns just like this. They're mathematical equations that will sit and go through motion. And what's interesting is when you zoom in on these fractal patterns, they just repeat themselves. So if you zoom in on on one of these cauliflower parts, you're going to see the same pattern closer in and closer in as you go in. And that's how fractals work. The small piece is the same pattern and structure as the larger piece. And that's how the universe is constructed. Same thing in broccoli. It's a fractal. Your bodies, by the way, are fractals, and so are trees. You know, this branching pattern is a manifestation of the way energy flows throughout the cosmos. Our bodies are fractals. The vein system in our bodies are fractals. The lymph system is fractal. The brain neural pathways, everything, it's all fractals, as you can see. Now, another interesting concept is superconductivity, and what we're going to be talking about ormus minerals or monoatomic minerals in a moment. But I noticed this just the other day in physicsworld.com, which is another physics journal, and scientists proved in 2001 that DNA has superconductivity in it. I've been saying this for years and years and years. The DNA is a superconducting antenna. It is an antenna that has monoatomic minerals in it, which we're going to talk about. And these monoatomic minerals are superconducting, and they act as an interface between consciousness and physicality. So throughout your body, you've got these superconducting minerals that are the interface between your consciousness and all consciousness and your physical structure. Because you hear doctors talk about the mind-body connection, but you know, if there really is such a thing, that means consciousness somewhere actually has to meet the physical structure. There has to be some kind of an interface in the physical structure, and it turns out these superconducting elements are where that structure meets. Now, we'll discuss very briefly another concept that's good to know about in the context of making your own superfoods and growing your own food, and that's something called the Schumann resonance. There is a pulsing in the Earth's atmosphere that comes from cosmic radiation and solar radiation and these scalar waves and all this different radiation coming from outside the Earth, and also from lightning and certain energies in the atmosphere. They come down, they strike the surface of the Earth, then they bounce back and they hit the ionosphere, and they just keep bouncing back and forth between the ionosphere and the Earth's surface. And that happens, it's supposed to happen at around 7.86 cycles per second. These days, it's almost double that because of all the man-made EMF and the electric grid and various things that are interfering with it, and possibly other things. And so what that pulsing does with us and with all living organisms is it slows us down, and in the case of humans, it gets us into deep sleep states at night. It allows our brains and nervous systems to get down into delta and theta brainwave states when we go to bed at night. It de-stresses plants and all living organisms. And so when you've got it accelerated, all living organisms are being stressed at a very fundamental, subtle level. Now, as I mentioned, these scalar waves coming from the cosmos, they're emanating from the center of the Earth, from the singularity at the center of the Earth, and that energy comes up through the surface of the Earth, and it's modulated by minerals in the soil, particularly volcanic minerals. Volcanic minerals, as it turns out, are high in these superconducting monoatomic elements. And so when you see mountains that are volcanic, very often you will see evidence of these scalar waves emanating, because as I mentioned, these scalar waves, they travel in spirals. They spiral. And in fact, all waves spiral. I was taught in engineering school, for example, electricity moves in these waves up and down like this. Well, they don't actually. The actual electron flow is spiraling. But when you look at it from the side, on an oscilloscope, it looks like it's going up and down, so everybody assumes it's an up and down transverse wave. Just like with waves on the ocean. If you look at the Earth and all the planetary bodies in the cosmos, they're not wiggling through space, they're spiraling through space. They're spinning and they're spiraling through space as they go. Our sun is not, we're taught this model that our sun is sitting out in the cosmos stationary and the planets are orbiting around on this plane around it. That's not at all how it works. The way it really works is that sun is spiraling through the galaxy and the planets are trailing behind, spiraling it around it. So it's all this big spiraling motion. And so that when that energy comes up through the center of the Earth, it's spiraling outward from the tips of these volcanic mountains, and you can see evidence of it sometimes in the form of lenticular clouds. These clouds that look like saucers or UFOs, that kind of stuff. What you're seeing is these spiraling scalar waves coming up from the mountains, slicing those clouds up into these disk shapes. So that's evidence of scalar waves or longitudinal waves. Tomorrow I'll be talking more about this in the context of geoengineering and other things. So people being smart as they are, they observe these phenomena in nature for thousands of years, and they decided, well, hey, if a mountain can do it, we can do it too, and they built things like pyramids to capture these scalar waves and to create scalar fields and also to create concentrated scalar waves for various purposes, beneficial and not necessarily beneficial. So pyramids, for example, are scalar wave transceivers. They are an antenna that picks up the scalar energy coming down from the sun and coming up from the center of the Earth, and it creates a localized field that has very beneficial effects for living organisms in the area. This is a picture of a scalar wave vortex coming off of a pyramid that Dr. D. Nelson and his wife Geo produced back in 1979. They built, I believe, a pyramid. I forget what it was made of. I think it was made of crystal or something. But basically, you can capture, if you use the right construction methods and materials, you can build these pyramids or cones that will capture this energy. And out of the tip of the pyramid or the cone, you will see these double helix scalar waves, which looks a lot like DNA. And if all this sounds like a bunch of woo-woo New Age nonsense to you, there's a very high-level Russian physicist named Alexander Golod who works for the Russian State Defense Center. He's a very high-level military in the Russian military. And he was tasked with studying pyramids. And he found out, in fact, that all of the pyramids on planet Earth, the man-made ones from the past, are all part of one planetary scalar grid system, and that whoever built them, even though they were built over many different generations, whoever designed the grid system had to have had at least air flight capabilities to direct and design that grid system. More likely, they probably had space flight capabilities. But he, this eminent physicist figured this stuff out and started studying it and imitating it, and he wound up building pyramids for doing all kinds of things like making oil wells flow better and improving water and things like that. He wound up building a very large pyramid outside of Moscow. It's 144 feet high, weighs 55 tons. It cost $1 million plus to build, and it's completely made out of wood and fiberglass and glue. There's no metal in it whatsoever, because metals can act as scalar wave guides, or they can block scalar waves. And long story short, if you're going to build pyramids starting out, it's best to use non-conducting, electrically non-conducting materials. So Golod built this pyramid, and he found a lot of very interesting benefits from it. Oops, what did I just do? Okay, there we go. First of all, they found that people that go inside the pyramids very often will get healed of diseases or have their health improved quite a bit. And so these people are sitting inside the pyramid just for that very purpose. These large globes, they're made out of mineral materials that will absorb the scalar waves and emanate them into a field around there. So the people are sitting around these globes. Had a lot of amazing benefits. This is the inside of the pyramid. You can see the structure of it. Here's some of the benefits of his pyramid. They discovered it would detoxify groundwater and reduce the hardness, including nuclear radioactivity. So a pyramid can neutralize radioactivity, which I'm going to be talking about tomorrow. And it reduced it in the groundwater and in the atmosphere. It can neutralize poisons placed inside of it. It's a very interesting benefit. They found that people that were around it or inside of it improved their immune systems, improved cellular regeneration, dropped blood leukocyte count, suppresses pathogens and radioactivity in living organisms placed inside of it. Also increases the yields of seeds by 30 to 100%, reduces frequency and severity of seismic activity, lightning, and severe weather, including hurricanes and tornadoes. So they observed for about a 350-kilometer diameter that this pyramid would stop hurricanes, tornadoes, severe weather, lightning, because one of the things it does is these scalar waves, when they go up in the atmosphere, they change the ionization of the atmosphere, and they pull particles in the Earth's atmosphere that are not supposed to be there, meaning man-made pollution, actually pulls it out into space. Golod had access to high-level, top-secret military radars that could see the scalar waves coming off of his pyramid, and they confirmed that what this thing is doing is creating this giant vortex of energy that's like an upside-down tornado, and it acts like a vacuum cleaner, and it will pull these pollutants out of space, out of the atmosphere, and pull them out into space. And because this energy is folding in on itself like a tornado, it gets stronger as it goes along. Unlike normal wave propagation, where you have, for example, a flashlight, you turn it on, and as you go away from the source, the waves get weaker and more spread out. Scalar waves start out in a large vortex, and they fold in on themselves, and they get stronger as they go. So they're at their peak strength at their focal point away from the source, which is kind of like bizarro world physics. So Golod showed a lot of things like this. It also heals the ozone layer, lowers the viscosity of oil wells, increasing yields, and an interesting side effect, it brings back springs to the surface. They noticed all these springs popping up on the surface, and it's because spring water has these monoatomic elements in them which are anti-gravitational, and the scalar waves and the scalar fields from these pyramids make them levitate even more, so they start pushing up from the ground and open up springs. The most interesting benefit that I've found, and this really gives me hope for humanity, because, you know, when I talk to people here today, there's a lot of disillusionment and hopelessness about where things are going on this planet, because it looks like everything's going to hell in a handbasket and there's no hope for humanity. Well, I'm here to tell you that ain't the case at all. I've worked with people who have created solutions for all these problems, including air pollution, water pollution, free energy, radioactivity in the oceans and in the atmosphere. It can all be cleaned up within a few weeks or a few months. I've seen technologies to do it all. That's what I'm going to be talking about tomorrow. That's what I'm going to be talking about today. There are solutions for all of this stuff, because the one trump card that the powers that be don't want you to know is consciousness creates reality. Your own physiology is a scalar wave generator. You are the hands of God. These energies that are coming from the cosmos, they pass through you. That's the whole concept of Chinese medicine, of qi flowing in and out of the body. It literally works that way, and we'll get more into that. But you've got these superconducting minerals within your own physiology and within your own body, and that's where this energy flows in and out of the physical structure. That's where consciousness meets the physical structure. It's in these superconducting elements. So they observed that outside of this pyramid, there were some flowers growing in the fields around, and let me back up, you can see large fields around there. They noticed these flowers growing in the field around the pyramid that no one had ever seen before. So Golod called in a botanist and had them identified, and it turns out the flowers have been extinct on Earth for 11 million years. Surprise, surprise! Hey, Sergeant Carter. So what does that tell me? That tells me, well, if they can bring back extinct species, then maybe we can harness that technology and bring back extinct species. Not necessarily Jurassic Park, but maybe some of these things that we've destroyed. You know, that at least says it's a possibility. And, you know, this is not in the National Enquirer. This is a Russian physicist working for the Russian military doing this and confirming this. So that gives me a lot of hope. And that's way cool. What else can we bring back? And it's because this scalar energy is the energy of consciousness. It is the energy that makes matter and energy. And Golod theorized, by the way that it brought these flowers back is the actual pattern for everything that has ever existed or ever will is out there in the quantum field or in the Akashic records, if you want to call it that. But it's energetic. The pattern's already out there, and we just bring it in to form. And consciousness does that. Imagine if this whole planet understood that consciousness creates reality and directed it that way. What couldn't we do? We'd have free energy. This whole planet would be very, very different. It'd be clean, and we might just get along with each other. Or it might be like a Star Trek episode, where everybody tries to kill each other, but I doubt it. So anyway, there's a lot of really cool things that come out of this. What the heck does this have to do with making your own superfoods? Everything, which I'm going to show you. But when I start showing you, it's going to sound like a bunch of New Age nonsense unless you understand some of the physics. And when you do understand the basics of this, then you can take it and maximize the heck out of whatever you're doing, whether it's meditation or body work or eating or growing food or purifying water. There's massive implications to all this stuff, and that's what I teach. Okay, we're going to skip over that. And Golot's not the only one. There's a lot of people around the world experimenting with pyramids, myself included. Dr. Valery Uvarov from the Department of UFO Research, Paleosciences and Paleotechnology at the National Security Academy of Russia is also working with pyramids and doing all kinds of stuff. And I'm going to tell you, it doesn't matter how fancy your academic credentials are. When you start doing this kind of work, you immediately get poo-pooed by mainstream science. I hold that as a badge of honor. I don't care. I don't care what people think. And apparently neither does Uvarov, because he's going for it. But he's making a lot of wonderful discoveries about what pyramids can do, and he's building them. Also, the Bosnian pyramids. Some of you might have heard about the Bosnian pyramids. The largest pyramid in the world was discovered in Bosnia. It was so big they thought it was a mountain because it was buried underneath soil. Gosh, there's this giant mountain that's covered with grass and trees, but it's shaped like a pyramid. So they finally dug it up, and he's making all these amazing discoveries about that pyramid and the energies coming off of it. There's also a wonderful book, if I can remember the name of it. It's Seed of something, Stone of Plenty. But it's basically a book where this scientist went to all these anomalous sites, pyramids, and sites that native people, like mounds, these structures that people had built, these artificial structures that people had built, and studied them energetically, studied them scientifically, and measured the energies coming off of them. It's a very fascinating book, and he, quantified a lot of what's going on in these types of structures. Dr. Konstantin Meil from Germany is another amazing, brilliant man who is one of the preeminent authorities on scalar waves in the world. He also solved what's known as the unified field equation, which is one equation that describes all matter and energy at any scale. And that's something that Einstein and all of his contemporaries and pretty much all of mainstream science has yet been able to do, because there are a lot of assumptions made about the nature of matter and energy that are fundamentally flawed. And also people like Einstein didn't think that anything could go beyond the speed of light. And as it turns out, lots of things can go beyond the speed of light, and there are many things that can affect the speed of light. The speed of light itself is not fixed. It's mutable. So Meil proved that. And of course, when you prove something like that, the world doesn't come rushing to your doorstep thanking you. They immediately attack you and poo-poo you and all that, until the generations have died off, that all believe that. And then the next generation comes along and accepts it as truth. So also Thomas Bearden, another, for those of you that are tech geeks that want to get more information about this stuff, particularly heavy-duty applications and what you can do with it, Thomas Bearden, former NASA nuclear engineer, is also a great source. He's got a whole DVD set called the Energy from the Vacuum series. It's like 37 DVDs and counting. He keeps adding to it. Phenomenal information from him. Okay. And then myself, I make devices. I make scalar energy devices for various purposes. For example, this pyramid, which we have up front, I chose not to turn it on because when I do, it puts out about a 20-foot radius field, and it puts out the Schumann resonance and these scalar waves that will de-stress you and relax you and put you back into the old Schumann pulse. And typically when I do that at a stage, the first few rows fall asleep very often. They're like, oh, they get so relaxed. So I figured I would leave it off. But so I've got experience actually making applications of this stuff. So I'm not just like reading stuff on the internet and talking about this stuff. I've been doing this for a long time. And we also make static devices, discs and little things that put out scalar fields that have various benefits. They can help protect against EMF. They can get you into deeper sleep, protect you against stress, stop jet lag. But the purpose for our talk today is they can improve plant and microbe growth massively. I wish I had a picture of it, but I don't. One of the ladies that came to one of my workshops bought one of these things, and she put it in her kitchen, on the kitchen counter, and she had an avocado seed sitting in a glass of water. She just stuck the toothpicks in the, had this sitting in the water. And she went off to South America for 2 weeks, and she came back. And when she got back, the avocado plant was 2 feet high. But the interesting part to me was, not only was the plant 2 feet high in 2 weeks, inside with no light, but also the water level in the glass had not gone down any. And the reason is because, I believe, is because plants are energy to matter converters. They have a symbiotic relationship with us. We're matter to energy converters. Plants are energy to matter converters. And these plants can take scalar energy, which normally is coming from the sun and the cosmos, and convert it directly to matter. There's an incredible quantum process going on in photosynthesis. And so these plants can feed off this scalar energy and convert it directly into their own matter. Crystals also are scalar wave transceivers. They act like antennas for scalar energy. And crystals, this is a well-known phenomenon in physics. They are oscillators, which means if you send energy into them in one frequency, it'll come out the other end a different frequency, the frequency of the crystal itself. And so this is used a lot in electronics. I mean, oscillators are extremely common. Crystal oscillators are extremely common in electronics. You can direct your own energy through them. This is why body workers who are in the know will use crystals in their body work, because they can take their scalar energy when they're doing Reiki or massage or whatever that they're directing through their hands, and they can hold a crystal and they can modulate the frequency through the crystal. So, you can build your own scalar energy devices. We don't have time to get into that, but I do workshops on that. I'll be coming out with DVDs and things on that. These pyramids, I'm going to be talking about more what you can do with these pyramids. They have all kinds of amazing things that they can do. But for our purposes, you can build these little pyramids out of a material called organite, and if you build them properly, they will enhance plant growth immensely and microbe growth as well. That's why I came up with these discs, actually, the large disc that I make. I developed that for myself to put underneath a fermentation bucket so that it will enhance fermentation. Now, another concept we need to talk about very briefly, because I've already talked about it, is these monoatomic elements, these superconducting monoatomic elements. They are created in soil. Bacteria eat rocks, and they break them down into small particle sizes of just a few atoms bundled together. Those are known as angstrom minerals. And on occasion, depending on what minerals are in the soil, if they're volcanic minerals, and they have the platinum group minerals in the soil, and also silver and mercury, gold and copper, they can be broken down into individual atoms that are not bound to each other. Now, according to conventional physics, that is impossible, but in fact it happens. And so these monoatomic minerals are also known as ORMUS, orbitally rearranged monoatomic elements, and they are extremely regenerative to living organisms. So if you feed them, if you create them through fermentation or photosynthesis, they're extremely healing regenerative. If you feed them to plants, they're extremely powerful at jacking up nutrient levels and making the plants create all kinds of chemistry, phytonutrients, antioxidants that are extremely regenerative and healing. So rather than just growing your sprouts in trays or whatever, the normal way that everybody teaches, there are things you can do to jack up the monoatomic levels in these plants and have massive amounts of nutrients that are extremely regenerative to the body. These are just various sprouts I'm used to growing: sunflower and wheat and buckwheat and green peas and various things. Your sprouting instructions, the handouts, for those of you who didn't get them, I gave out some handouts on sprouting methods that I use. And so if those handouts are still passed around somewhere, whoever's got them, they're out? Okay, well, they're out. But if you email me, I can send those instructions. Okay, so you can make your own custom-tailored fermented beverages or brews that you can not only drink, that's a probiotic and an antioxidant, but you can also make your own plant foods. Because microbes are nature's nanotechnology. They break things down into smaller things. So they break nutrients and minerals down into angstrom and monoatomic particle sizes that the body can uptake and that plants can uptake. And so there is a microbe mixture called effective microorganisms from a Japanese professor named Tiro Higa, and you can mix that with a quart of molasses, throw it into 5 gallons of water, and in 3 weeks you've got a massive probiotic brew. So you can make gallons and gallons and gallons of this probiotic brew, which you can then use yourself. You can ingest it, you can give it to animals, you can feed it to plants, you can spray plants with it. It loves to eat mold and mildew. These microbes will eat mold and mildew, so you can spray your lawn furniture with it. You can degrease your engine with it. It'll eat grease. I had a very expensive air conditioning system installed, and it got loaded up with mold because of all the toxic chemicals that were used in the manufacturing. I sprayed it with this stuff. 2 weeks later, mold gone. And it didn't just kill it, it ate it. It just went away. It just disappeared. It's amazing stuff. So we sell this stuff on our website, and we have instructions on how to use it and a guide on how these various applications. You can use it for so many things. This is why I recommend it and sell it and tell people how to make it, because you can use it to eliminate odors in the household. You can use it as a non-toxic cleaner around the house. You can use it in the bathroom. You can spray your shower with it. It'll eat scum and mold in the shower. Just tons and tons of uses for this stuff. And you can make, like I said, you can throw all kinds of interesting ingredients into it. Herbs, rock powders, all kinds of superfoods. You can throw them into there. You can even take crappy supplements that are not very bioavailable, and you can ferment them down and make them bioavailable. These are also other things you can ferment. You can do the same things with kombucha, water kefirs, any kind of ferment. You can immerse these ferments in scalar fields, and you can feed them these ormus minerals. And where do you get these ormus minerals? We'll show you in just a moment. Oops. That's a jar of water kefir grains that I had, and when I did this, I took, one way you can make these ormus minerals, you can vortex water and put like sea minerals into it, vortex it in a magnetic field, and it will create these monoatomic elements. So I did that, and I fed it to my water kefir grains, and they grew 5 times the size that they normally do. Normally they're about the size of a pea, and they grew to bigger than a large marble each, and they would consume the food that you feed them in a third of the usual time, and the nutrient levels were off the charts. So as I mentioned, these microbes are in soil. These microbes eat rocks. They make these angstrom and monoatomic minerals. Plants uptake them, and so that's one reason why you can do things like feeding rock powders to soil and to plants along with these microbes, and the microbes will break the rock powders down and deliver them to the roots of the soil, to the roots of the plants, and then you get high levels of angstrom and monoatomic elements. You get very nutrient-dense food, way beyond anything you would normally get in regular sprouting and growing. This is the Keski volcano in Iceland that everybody's complaining about because it was throwing ash all across Europe and interfering with airline lanes. But what you're seeing here is lightning that's coming up off of the volcano. And the reason that is because these monoatomic elements are superconductors. They create very large superconducting, what are called Meissner fields. And these Meissner fields want to ground out to anything that they can. And so when you've got this massive quantity of these ormus elements being created in volcanic ash and volcanic rock, it wants to ground out. It creates a massive Meissner field, and you see this lightning shooting up off of the volcanoes. And of course, scientists are baffled because they know nothing about ormus and superconductivity. Now, you can, as I mentioned, you can make these ormus elements by vortexing water with minerals. So you can take, for example, concentrates, liquid sea minerals, or rock powders, or any kind of... Sea minerals are great because they have the exact ratio of elements that the human body has in it. So you take sea minerals of whatever source and throw them into either a device called a vitalizer, water vitalizer, which it creates a vortex and a magnetic field, or you can make your own. You can Google magnetic blender and you can get instructions on how to make your own. I'll be having a kit coming out any day now with these little blocks you can attach to your blender, and you can do this in your own blender. So in your own kitchen, you can vortex mineral water, create these superconducting monoatomic elements, which you can then drink. You can also feed it to plants and ferment, and you will get massive results. This is also a device from a company called Vortex Brewer. They've got a very large-scale one for agriculture, the exact same thing. You put compost tea and minerals and nutrients in this thing. It vortexes the water very gently using air bubbles, and you get the same thing. You get a creation of ormus elements and angstrom elements. You feed it to crops. You get massive heat resistance, massive cold resistance, massive insect resistance, massive nutrient levels, etc., etc., etc. As I mentioned, vortexing water in a magnetic field creates ormus elements. This happens in nature naturally all the time in rivers and stream beds. You've got, what are riverbeds and stream beds lined with? Rocks. What are rocks? They're crystals. Crystals are full of ormus. They emit scalar waves. So you're vortexing water over all these scalar waves, and very often magnetic rocks and paramagnetic rocks, that creates ormus. And as I mentioned, the DNA is loaded. Now, here we get to specifics, because we're about out of time. We got about 15 minutes left, maybe less. What do you do at your house? Okay, so if you're growing food, if you're growing sprouts, for example, sprouts, when they're grown in trays, do not have enough time, and they don't have a root structure to pull minerals out of the soil that you're growing them in very much. And so what you're going to get is, you're going to get decent nutrition, but you're not going to get superatomic fragilistic nutrition, which is what you really want, right? So the way you get superatomic fragilistic nutrition is by foliar feeding your sprouts these ormus elements. Now, it just so happens that there are companies that already sell this stuff. One of them here in Florida, Ocean Water will do it, by the way. So there's a company called Ocean Solutions over in Fort Pierce, Florida, that has an ocean water product that you can mix with water. You dilute it, you foliar feed it. You can also feed the roots if you're growing, regular plants in pots or outdoors. But you foliar feed them with this stuff. They'll uptake it through the leaves and get the elements into it that way. Another really phenomenal product is called MyGrow Minerals. The website is mygrowminerals.com. This is an ormus concentrate made from ocean water. They go up somewhere way up in the Pacific Northwest, way north around Canada. They test all their water to make sure that there's no pollution or radioactivity or anything in it. And basically, they guess what they do? They vortex the water through magnetic fields and very, very strong magnetic and electric fields, and they create ormus. And this stuff is phenomenal, whether you're using hydroponics or growing in trays or growing outdoors. Phenomenal, phenomenal. Another one is called Garden Shot. That's another high ormus plant food that you can buy. Gardenshot.com is the website. And then in my workshops and talks and things, I teach how to do this stuff as well. I'll be coming out with DVDs sometime in 2015 on how to do this high ormus sprouting and fermenting and that kind of stuff. Other products, Microblast. Now, this is a funny one. This Microblast product is a parasite cleanse. They sell it for parasite cleansing for humans. And, you take it, you put it in capsules, you ingest it, and it works phenomenally well at clearing pathogens and parasites in the body. But it was originally developed for agriculture. And so you can actually feed it to plants, and you'll get some of these same amazing effects. I can't tell you all the things it will do, actually, but it's quite amazing. So that's Microblast, restandrepair.com. Another great way to grow lots of nutrient-dense food in a very small space, very affordably, are tower gardens. And I'm not a dealer of these things. I have no financial ties to this company. It's Juice Plus. Towergarden.com is the website. These are basically what they call aeroponic systems. It's basically hydroponics where you have this nutrient mixture that you circulate up to the top of this tower. It floats down across the roots, and you get massive growth. Now, what's interesting, though, about this, I normally don't recommend hydroponics, but in this case, the nutrients that they made for this are all high ormus. They understood the way to make the nutrients is by fermentation, and they've got nutrient mixes that are very high ormus. You ever see plants growing on bare rock, on lava in like Hawaii? You'll just see like this plant growing straight out of rock, a lava rock. Well, the reason that they can do that is because lava is volcanic. It's so high in ormus, it's emitting all this scalar energy. The plants can feed directly off the scalar energy. They don't need to uptake nutrients through their roots. That's how that's able to happen. So you can do the same thing. You can feed these plants with this ormus, and they don't need all the nutrient requirements necessarily that a plant would grown in soil. Growing in soil is always the best because you've got this whole ecosystem of living organisms and all kinds of energies and things going on in the soil. So growing in soil is always best. But for people that are living in high rises in the middle of a big city or whatever, you can have one of these things out on your balcony. You can have, like, for example, those sprouts that I was growing in the trays, all the green sprouts. A lady emailed me and she said, do you take those outdoors and get them in the sunlight, or is that window facing south? I was like, no. The window's facing north. They never have any grow lights on them, nothing. But when you're feeding them superconducting monoatomic elements, you get insane growth and insane nutrient levels. And that's one thing you can do with these tower gardens. And by the way, these things are ridiculously cheap. The initial outlay for one of these things is around $400 or $500 for the big extended version, which I have. But once you've got that, one of these can grow enough food for a raw foodist who eats 100% raw food to eat gigantic salads twice a day, every day for 6 months for about less than $100. It's crazy cheap. So now other things you can do, rock powders. What kind of rock powders? Volcanic rock powders. Volcanic minerals are high in ormus elements. It just so happens that they're pretty easy to get. There's a product called azomite, which is phenomenal. Massive high ormus rock powder. You can feed it to your plants outdoors. You can feed it to your plants indoors. Sprouts going in trays aren't going to be able to uptake rock powder. So what you do in that case is you put these into a ferment, you break them down, and you make them 100% bioavailable, and then you foliar feed the plants with this stuff. Outdoors, you can sprinkle these things on the roots of your plants or on the soil around your plants, and then you can spray the effective microorganisms on that. The microorganisms will eat the rock powders, break them down into angstrom and monoatomic elements, which the plants can then uptake, and you will get insane growth and nutrient levels. I bought a brand new peach tree last summer from one of the big box stores, and it wasn't doing too well, and it was chemically fed. It was obvious it was chemically fed. I took it and stuck it in the ground, and I did this. I fed it with this whole nutrient mixture that I make, and the rock powders and the microbes. And when that thing, the next spring, I guess it was last summer when it fruited, it was ridiculous the amount of fruit that it had. It was just covered with fruit. And, that was from a sickly plant. These things have extremely regenerative powers, not just for plants, but for human beings as well. And that's why it's extremely important to understand scalar energy, or whatever you want to call it, orgone, some people call it orgone, and these monoatomic elements, because they are what heal us. And by the way, these monoatomic elements, there are two very interesting things that they can do. They can neutralize radioactivity in the body, and I can tell you that for a fact because I ingested some hot radioactive particles and got very sick and had to figure out how to heal myself. So I'm not reading this stuff on the internet. I did this. These monoatomic elements will neutralize radioactivity in the body, and other things as well. For those of you that may find that hard to believe, there was a man named Louis Kervran, who was a French physicist, who wrote a book called Biological Transmutation. You can check that out. He proved that the human body can transmute elements from one to the other. For example, the body can convert silica to calcium. So at any rate, monoatomic elements can do a lot of amazing things. They can also revert GMO DNA back to the original heirlooms. And this is one that the gene giants really don't want people to know about. The GMO plants in general and GMO organisms in general, one little secret that's not told much about them and is not let out much is that they will naturally revert their DNA back to the original over several generations. There was an experiment done, for example, with fruit flies where they were engineered to be blind, and after 7 generations they regained their sight. So it's a natural phenomenon, and the reason it's a natural phenomenon is because the genetic blueprint is not in the DNA. The genetic blueprint is in consciousness itself. The DNA is just the carrier of that pattern. The DNA is the manifestation of that pattern, and it is the antenna that brings that pattern into the physical structure. So if you understand that, you can, what can't you heal? You can heal DNA. I mean, I've healed DNA myself, I know. simply by ingesting these superconducting elements. Okay? So there's some phenomenal applications for this stuff. And it's as simple as getting rock powders and grinding them up and putting them into your ferments and feeding them to your plants and feeding them to your sprouts and things, and you can get massive amounts of nutrition in your food. This is the effect of microorganisms that Dr. Chiro Higa from Japan developed, and he's using this, by the way, in Japan to neutralize radioactivity. If you go to my website, at the beginning of this I had a link. It's radiationlinks.freshandalive.com. If you go to that link, you can see a lot of the information and evidence I'm talking about here. Because I'm rushed in this talk, I can't give out all the scientific validation for this stuff. But Higa was in Japan, and there was a farmer in Fukushima that took his microbes and sprayed his soil and his crops with it. And this is in Fukushima city itself. And this guy has no detectable radiation on any of his crops. He was able to sell them when all the farmers around him had massive radioactive contamination. And these things are ridiculously cheap. Or as David Wolf says, ridiculous. Ridiculously. $22 or so for a quart of this stuff. You throw it in 5 gallons of water with a quart of molasses, you get 5 gallons of it. And then when you use it, you dilute it thousands of times to 1. So you're talking about in a gallon of water, maybe a tablespoon per gallon of water of this stuff. It's ridiculously cheap. And you can do it yourself. That's crazy. Crazy great. So, all this whole mess, this radioactive mess from Fukushima and Chernobyl could all be cleaned up very quickly. I've worked with technologies that can do it. Unfortunately, we don't have time to talk about that today, but I'll talk about it a little bit tomorrow. Other things you can use to create ormus in your soil: mycorrhiza. Mycorrhiza are basically fungus spores that allow fungal roots to grow through soil. Soil is an incredible living ecosystem, and plants communicate through the soil like an internet, but through their roots and also through fungus mycelium, which are fungus roots that grow through the soil. They transfer information to the soil. They also break down elements in the soil. They secrete chemicals and acids like fulvic and humic acid that break down minerals in the soil and make them bioavailable. You can buy mycorrhiza spores. You can sprinkle them on your land. It will break down these toxins. It will break down radioactivity, and it will feed plants. It will help deliver nutrients more massively to the plants. Another really, really ridiculously simple way of making high ormus soil: do it the way nature does it. Just get a whole bunch of mulch from tree companies, arborists. They love giving it away because they have to pay to get rid of it. So I called up an arborist and I said, hey, bring me all the mulch you want to bring and dump it on my land. And 30 dump truck loads later, I piled it up into a big pile, and they just kept dumping it. And 30 dump truck loads is a lot. That's a lot. That's like 300 cubic yards or something. It's a lot of. But what plants are, as I mentioned, they're energy to matter converters, and they take these minerals from the soil, convert them into ormus. So why not just take them and use that, right? So plant leaves and the plant material is high in ormus. So you take it, you break it down, and then I spread this stuff about 3 feet thick, and I sprayed it with rock powders and microbes. And a year later, that 3 foot thick deep pile, or that 3 foot thick garden, was only about 12 inches thick. So it went down to a third in 1 year using these microbes. And do you think this has got a lot of ormus in it? It's got insane amounts of ormus in it. Things love growing in it. What I do is I let things grow up in it, and I see what comes up, and I get all kinds of interesting foods and things, and I just harvest them, and I just leave them there, and then I go plant my plants around in between it. So you let nature do what it wants to do, and you work with it. There's what mycelium look like: mushrooms and fungus. Mushrooms and fungi are the fruits of these mycelium. So if you've got mushrooms growing in your yard, that's a good sign. You want that. There's more mycelium. Okay, so we're out of time. Thank you very much. And if you want to ask me questions or talk to me later afterwards, I'll be somewhere around here, and we'll do that. Okay? Thank you. Hey, everybody, you know what? We got another half hour. I was thinking my talk ended at 3, but it goes till 3:30, so we'll do Q&A. All right. That's the fastest I've ever done this talk.
Are you going to keep talking?
Yeah, I'll keep talking. I'll take questions. Yeah. So let me get my mic back on here. Sorry about that. I was thinking I had an hour. All right. So questions. You had questions first. She was asking. Oh, we've got to wait for the microphone to come down.
Check.
Forgot about that. This lady right here.
My question is any of the
Just put it close to your mouth.
supplement? I think one called Roboblast or something was for parasite. Would that be good for Candida?
Microblast. Microblast. Yeah, restandrepair.com.
Would that be good for Candida as well, or just parasites?
It works with all pathogens, but Candida not as well as some other things. Like I personally use MMS, chlorine dioxide. I find that works a lot better for myself. I'm not giving any medical advice, but that's what I use for getting rid of parasites and yeast.
Thank you.
But Microblast does work well as a parasite cleanse.
Yeah.
Yes?
Hi. There's a structure that's very similar to a pyramid, which is the base of a square, and it's called a trilon. Are you familiar with that figure?
A trilon?
Yeah, it has the base of a triangle. So
yeah.
So essentially, if you're looking at it, it would be a three-sided pyramid instead of a four-sided pyramid.
Right.
Has any work been done with that?
Oh, yeah. Lots of people work with tetrahedrons, three-sided pyramids. Yeah, absolutely. They have different properties. And pyramids in general, when you change the angles of the pyramid, you're changing the frequencies that it tunes into. So, for example, Golad's pyramids, they use what's called the phi ratio, which is the ratio of the base to the height. So absolutely, you can design pyramids with 3 sides, 4 sides, more than that, and get different effects. You can change the angles and tune in, and also the materials that it's made of as well.
Do you know what kind of effects have been done with trilons?
No.
Okay. Just as a historical note, Pythagoras wrote extensively on the powers of trilons. In fact, he said that it could be used effectively as a time machine.
You know, it's interesting you say that because I was watching a video of this guy named Crotolo Sessimo, who is an ambassador for an intentional community in Italy called Damanhur. And if you guys want to see this, if you go to GaiamTV.com, that's GAIAMTV.com, there are interviews with him, and he says in there that the founder of Damanhur, which is this guy named Falco, that he used some kind of technology that he developed to travel through time and go back to ancient Egypt, right? Well, he was using scalar energy technology back in the 70s, and he's purportedly is the reincarnated, or was, he's dead now, but he supposedly was the reincarnated Leonardo da Vinci. So, all these things that, if it's true, it's a really, really interesting story, but I wouldn't be surprised if you could time travel with a pyramid. And maybe Falco did it already, and maybe Pythagoras did it too, Okay,
thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Yes?
Can you expand a bit on the transmutation and the book that the doctor wrote about including the conversion of silica to calcium within our body?
Yeah, there's a book called Biological Transmutation, and it's by Louis Kervran, Kervran. I hope I'm not butchering his name. It's French. Kervran. And there's also another interesting book that's kind of related to that called The Calcium Bomb, and it talks about nanobacteria and what nanobacteria's role. They're these angstrom-sized bacteria that were heretofore undiscovered until recent years that are so minute, but they create calcification in the body. They take organic minerals and turn them into inorganic calcium, and they make reefs. They basically make their own shells. They're like little clams, and they make these shells that are what creates calcification in the body. So it's a very interesting book that's kind of related to Kervran's work. Well, what contributes to the transmutation of elements, I was talking about particularly transmuting these radioactive elements in the body, but you can transmute all kinds of elements in the body because the body can basically do what it's already doing better if you're getting more of these ormus elements into the body, more angstrom elements into the body through foods and these superfoods that you can ferment and grow, and then also, ingesting plenty of probiotics, enzymes, vitamins and minerals, all that kind of stuff helps that transmutation process in the body. And I'll be talking tomorrow about what I've done to pull radioactive elements out of the body as well as neutralize them, based on my own experience. I've actually done it. And so I know it can be done. It's not conjecture. And, my website doesn't have information right now, but I understand they're going to be putting this on YouTube, so maybe it'll be on YouTube. And I also do workshops, and I'll have information products coming out about this stuff. 3 weeks ago, this happened to me. 3 weeks ago, I got radioactive particles in my body and had, the reactions from it and had to deal with it and get rid of it. And fortunately, it was really just a big spirit trick because I was already doing the things to get rid of it. And I was just happened to be testing this particular zeolite supplement called Advanced TRS. And for those of you that are interested, I'll be talking about it tomorrow, but it's from a company called Cosiva. And I was testing that supplement. Before I ever recommend supplements, I always test them. So I was testing this supplement and had been for several weeks. And so apparently I ingested some hot particles on some food that I had that we had grown or we had gotten from a health food store. And I had a massive reaction to it. But because I was doing that and other things already, 4 or 5 days, the stuff passed out and everything healed up, and I was good to go after about a week. But had I not been doing those things, normally when that happens to people, they come down with cancer and they die after a while. So those are the kinds of things I'm going to be talking about tomorrow. Any other questions?
Yeah, I'm a aquaponic farmer. And I want to know a little bit more about the medium that you use, because I use clay, but I also have volcanic rock as well. So just simply switching out my medium will make my substrate or my soil more ormus for my plants that I'm growing?
Yeah, if you're growing hydroponically or aquaponically, you don't have to give up what you're already doing, but you can, for example, take whatever nutrients you're using already and you can throw in rock powders and things and then ferment them. Use this EM to ferment them, and that will break them down. And if you do it in magnetic fields, for example, here's a really simple one that I tell people to do. You get a regular 5-gallon brew bucket, and then you get a larger bucket that goes around that, like a 7.5, 8-gallon bucket, which you can get at home brew stores. And you put the big bucket, you take the big bucket and you pour about 1.5 inches of magnetite sand. Magnetite is a natural magnet, and it's paramagnetic as well. And so you pour that in the bottom of the big bucket, then you stick your brew bucket down inside of that, and you pour in the gap between those two buckets, you fill it with magnetite sand. That will create a vessel that's immersed in a magnetic field, in the paramagnetic field, and that will jack up the ormus levels in your ferment. So then you can ferment whatever you're using in your plant nutrients. Or if you want to make your own plant food, you can do the same thing. You take rock powders, you can take clays, volcanic minerals, whatever you want, sea minerals, dump them all into that and ferment them for months with this EM, and it will create ormus and angstrom particles that the plants can uptake better for aquaponics or hydroponics.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
How does this relate to like energized or ionized water? Is it a similar type of thing?
Well, ionized water, for those that aren't familiar, ionized water you make in a device called an ionizer, surprisingly, and you basically have 2 tanks of water. There are a couple ways you can make it. Most of the ionizers on the market for sale for health, you hook them up to a faucet, the water comes through, and it zaps the water with electricity, and it splits the water into basically acid water and alkaline water with highly ionized acid water and highly ionized alkaline water. And what it's really doing is, what's really doing the healing is not the alkaline or the OH ions, it's the H2 gas molecules that are doing the healing. But at any rate, so I prefer to do that instead of using these flow-through models where you hook them up to a faucet. They're very weak, because they don't have enough time for the water to zap it well. And also zapping water with electricity homeopathically is not the greatest thing to do. But I have used ionized water because, for example, ionized acid water is extremely good for plants, feeding plants, and it will help break down minerals in the soil. But at any rate, the type of ionization I prefer to do is using what's called a batch ionizer, where you have 2 tanks separated by a membrane, and you've got an electrode in each tank and a power supply hooked up to them, positive and negative. And in one side, you'll get very strong ionized acid water, and the other side, you get very strong ionized alkaline water. The alkaline water you can feed to animals and humans and things, and it will help flush acids out of the body and all kinds of stuff. The acid water you can feed to plants, and it goes back to that symbiotic relationship between plants and animals. Their waste is our food and vice versa. So with them, they like acid, we like alkaline. So you can feed acid water to plants. As it relates to Ormus, I don't know that there's a direct relationship between Ormus and ionized water, but things you can do, you can take acid water, put these rock powders into them, and ferment them, and you'll get even higher nutrient levels. Mm-hmm. The fermentation process naturally will create an acidic environment, so you don't really need to do that. But, or for example, let's say you're feeding your crops with rock powders, if you're watering them with ionized acid water, it's going to be more effective because the acids are going to tend to break the minerals down more and deliver them to the plants better. So there are things like that you can use ionized water for.
Have you heard about the magnetic water softeners?
Yeah. Magnetic water softeners, where you basically put a magnet around your water pipe and flow through, and it breaks the particles down. So they're
Right,
not
does
as...
it rearrange a charge? Is that what that's
Right.
supposed to do?
Yeah, so it doesn't stick to the pipes. Yeah.
Okay. And Dr. Higa's formula, does that, if you keep, if you make it and you keep using it as a batch, like the mother or whatever of that, does that change the profile over time? Or
Yes,
do you have
that's a
to-
very good question. If you're making your own EM brews and you take the brew and you set some aside to make the next batch, is it going to get weaker over time? And the answer is yes, unless you're doing it in a very controlled environment where you're doing all these things I'm talking about, and making sure that the nutrients are there and making sure that the organisms aren't stressed. For example, if you were growing them in a scalar field from one of my devices and feeding them rock powders and doing those kinds of things, then the microbe count won't diminish. So if you're feeding them properly and maintaining them properly, and the microbe count won't diminish, you can keep doing it over and over and over again. Most people don't have the wherewithal to do that, and considering they're pretty cheap, after you make a batch or 2 of it, I would just buy more microbes.
And have you ever tried to use seaweed in that concoction?
Yes. Have I ever used seaweed in these brews? Absolutely. They're phenomenal, but these days there's so much radioactivity in the ocean, I would make sure positively that there's no radioactive elements or toxins in the seaweed if you're going to use them.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Here we go, Jenny. Wait. Oh, well, wait a minute. We'll get the microphone here, then we'll go to Jenny. I can speak loudly. Well, it's got to be for YouTube. We got to put it on recording for YouTube.
Along with using Ormus on your sprouts, do you take it as a supplement, like in an eyedropper every day, or?
That's a good question. Yeah, and I'm going to be talking about that tomorrow as well. But the question is, do I take Ormus supplements directly? Absolutely. First of all, I brew my own, so I do that. There are a few Ormus supplements on the market that there's only one that I would recommend. There's lots of Ormus supplements on the market that I don't recommend because they're using alchemical methods to make them. For example, what's called the wet method, where you take salt and you mix it with lye and you do some things to it, and it creates this white precipitate. That white precipitate is not in a form that the body can use, and it can be toxic because it can have heavy metals in it. And also, when you're ingesting these Ormus elements, particularly if they're made alchemically, what you're doing in those forms is artificially jacking up the superconductivity in the body, which shortens the time between thought and manifestation of thought. So you can wind up manifesting things in your life that you didn't intend. See, we have this safety buffer called time. Normally, when we're living naturally, when you have a thought, it doesn't instantaneously manifest. You have to put focus on things, and you have to have an emotional charge behind it, and particularly a positive emotional charge behind it to manifest things. But when you artificially shorten that by jacking up the superconductivity in the body unnaturally with these alchemical ormus elements, then you wind up manifesting things that you really didn't want to manifest, and you can create a nightmare for yourself. So I don't recommend that. There is a product there's a company called Ancient Tech. That's ancienttek.com. And they have some wonderful ormus products, and they are using a very different method than everybody else, and they've got some great products. And then, the best way to get it is through food. I mean, all these supplements, any nutrient-dense food-based supplement is going to be high in these monoatomics. So, for example, blue-green algae, Klamath Lake blue-green algae, phenomenal. Any of these plants that are grown biodynamically, or, for example, Dean Martins is here in the audience, Herbs of Light. They take all of these biodynamically grown herbs, and then they use a Victor Schauberger water technology to concentrate the life force when they're harvested to keep some of the life force in those herbal extracts. So, Herbs of Light are a phenomenal product. They're going to have high ormus. Those ones I mentioned here today are all high in ormus. All of them are. On a daily basis, right now I'm taking a lot of supplements that I don't normally take to make sure that all this radiation gets healed up in my body and to keep it out. So, for example, I'm taking apple pectin, and I'll be talking about all these tomorrow, but I'm taking a whole slew of foods and supplements that are all high in ormus to keep the stuff out of my body and heal the damage that's been done. So, Jenny, you had a question.
What do you know about Carlton Nolte and his website? I believe is Advanced Technology, but
Yeah.
he does this structure.
What do I know about Carlton Nolte's water structure device?
Right.
It does exactly what I was showing that rivers and stream beds do. When you see water flowing through a stream or a riverbed, it's passing over these rocks that are round, and you get the vortexing action going on. And the rocks are made out of materials and crystals that are emitting scalar waves and magnetics, and that's what Nolte's device does. You've got these spheres inside of a tube. For those of you who aren't familiar, and you hook it up to your plumbing, and the water flows through it, and it homeopathically restructures the water. Now, what does that mean? What that means is water molecules want to cluster together into groups of 6. Normally, when water's healthy, the molecules, water's a liquid crystal, so the molecules want to grab onto each other and then let go. It's kind of like a square dance. They're grabbing onto their partner of 6 and doing a little do-si-do and then letting go and grabbing onto some more. And this all happens extremely fast in nanoseconds. So you've got this structuring going on, and if the water's been exposed to beneficial energies or materials or processes, then it will have that hexagonal structure, that 6-sided structure, as it's doing that dance. And that is the basis of homeopathy. When you take water and you send it through certain processes, like you do in homeopathy, you can expose it to materials that will structure it, you can vortex it, you can run it through scalar fields, magnetic fields, ionization. All these things will structure it in various ways and create a clustering pattern that when that water is ingested, that pattern will trigger either a disease response or a healing response in the body. That's the whole basis of homeopathy. So you can do these processes, like I was saying, like this, making this brew. You can just take water and put it inside of a vessel surrounded in magnetite sand, for example, and that will structure it. You can use these scalar energy devices that I make or that other people make. There are lots of ways to do that. And there are water devices like Nolte's and others that will structure water.
Well, that's actually something I use. In fact, if anybody wants to see the travel one, I've got one here.
Yeah, and as far as water goes, the only water purification system that I would recommend for drinking water that can take any crappy tap water from any city, even like LA or Chicago or New York. And it's funny, by the way, people from New York City always say, oh, we've got good water in New York. Oh, yeah. No, you don't. Nobody does in a city municipal system, because water is not just chemistry. But the only system I've found that will take that water and not only structure it homeopathically and filter it chemically, because water is not just chemistry. The only thing that will do that, clean it up homeopathically, and put ormus into the water, which is crucial. That's what's in these natural waters like spring water, is the Miracule water system. Their website is miraculewater.com. That is the only one I've seen. They can take these crappy tap waters and turn it into living high ormus water. And when you drink that water, you see amazing results, which unfortunately I can't tell you about. Miracule, M-I-R-A-C-U-L-E, water.com. Mm-hmm. It works on well systems, yeah. M-I-R-A-C-U-L-E, water.com. Miraculewater.com. It's a phenomenal system. The guy who invented it, Ron Talmadge, he was actually assassinated for developing free energy technology. But he developed this water technology to heal himself because he had some serious ailments that he had to heal, major stuff, and this water got him to do it. And if you watch videos of him, by the way, on YouTube or on their website, he's got like jet black hair. It's so black it looks fake, and I thought, I wonder if he dyes his hair. And I talked to his girlfriend, she said, no, the water did that. It went from pepper gray to jet black just from drinking the water. So it's structured, it's got ormus, it's all kinds of things. They vortex it through magnetic fields and scalar fields. They do all kinds of stuff to it. And it starts out with a reverse osmosis system, so they purify the water with RO, but then they restructure it and put ormus into it. It's an amazing system. I haven't seen any water system in the world like it. Right now, I think it runs about $1,200, and that is ridiculously cheap. They should be charging more for what that is, because there's other systems way more expensive than that. Somebody else have a question?
Okay, when you say spring water, I'm sorry, what does that mean? I'm from Germany, and Germans drink a lot of spring water. They have spring wells everywhere. I mean, in every little county you get your own little spring water. Here,
well,
it doesn't seem like there's anything.
If we had another 2 or 3 hours, I could get into water and the hydrological cycle of the earth and ormus, but since we don't,
okay.
Let me suffice it to say that spring water is at the water coming up from a spring is at the end of the hydrological cycle, and it has accumulated ormus in it. So if the water has not been polluted, or if it's not got some kind of unusual mineral deposits that are polluting it, then that water is extremely healing and regenerative, and some more so than others. That's why, throughout history, people like Ponce de Leon searched for the fountain of youth, because these fountains, some of them are very high in ormus, and actually the best way to get the ormus in the body is not by ingesting it, it's topically through the skin. And so that's why Europeans particularly have more awareness of this, and they will seek out springs to go, and like warm springs here in Florida, lots and lots of Europeans come to warm springs here in Florida, and they don't know anything about ormus, but they've just heard that it's got a reputation for healing. And so that's the deal with spring water. It's, the best water that you can get these days, except for maybe a Miracule system.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else? Nobody else? Is there any way to ramp up the nutrients in my countertop sprouting? We'll have to get the microphone to you.
I grow broccoli sprouts on the counter with no dirt. Is there any way to ramp up the nutrients in there with the ormus? Yeah,
exactly what I was talking about. You'd foliar feed them these ormus elements. The simplest way is just to buy micro minerals or ocean solutions and follow their directions and foliar feed them. You can also ferment your own EM brew and throw all these rock powders and nutrients into it and use that as well. But that's how you do it, foliar feed it. Yeah, when you're growing on a counter or growing it in trays. Anybody else? Fermentation and photosynthesis are quantum processes. They